Bismillah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna alhamdulillah. نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلوات الله وسلامه وبركاته عليه. أما بعد، فإن خير الكلام كلام الله جل في العلا، وأحسن هدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. As we continue in this explanation of the Hamawiyyah by the great Imam Abu Abbas Taqiyuddin Ahmad ibn Abdul Halim ibn Abdul Salam ibn Taymiyyah al-Harrani al-Dimashqi rahimahullah, who died the year 728 after the migration of our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. The explanation of this treatise entitled Al-Hamawiyyah, or as they say, Fataawa al-Hamawiyyah al-Kubra, by the great Imam. This very beneficial treatise with the time now 6:57 p.m. Wednesday, November the 10th, 2021. On this day of Wednesday, November the 10th, 2021, where agrees the Islamic calendar, which is the correct one. It's the night of 6, well, technically the 6th of Rabi' al-Thani, whereas technically it's Thursday night, which agrees with the year, as they call it, Laylat al-Khamis, which is technically Thursday night, where the year is 1443 after the migration of our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. We continue with the great Imam, and he said, rahimahullah, as it goes on, or as we continue, this very beneficial book. It says, فَلَمَّا وَثُمَّ لَمَّا عُرِّبَتِ الْكُتُبُ الرُّومِيَّةِ فِي حُدُودِ المئة الثانية زاد البلاء مع ما ألقى الشيطان في قلوب الطلاب ابتداء من جنس ما ألقاه في قلوب أشباههم. He says, so when the books of Rome were Arabized, meaning they were translated into Arabic language, he says approximately in the years, or the 6th century, the 2nd century, that the atrocities became worse and they increased, despite what Shaitan had already cast in the hearts of those misguided before, meaning that it became more misguidance upon more misguidance. Despite the fact that what Shaitan had cast in those who were misguided prior. He said, from the type in which Shaitan had cast into those who came later, meaning those who were affected similar, it just all came together, meaning that their hearts were similar. It says, وَلَمَّا كَانَ فِي حُدُودِ المئة الثانية انتشرت هذه المقالة التي كان السلف يسمونها مقالة الجهمية بسبب بشر الغياث المريسي وطبقته وكلام الأئمة مثل مالك. It says, so then when it came within the 2nd century, this statement had spread, in which the Salaf had called it the statement of the Jahmiyyah. Why? Because of the individual's name was Bishr ibn Ghiyath al-Marisi. This is what we'll stop at it just to take some time to speak about. Bishr ibn Ghiyath, his name is Bishr ibn Ghiyath ibn Abi Karima al-Adawi. His name was Bishr ibn Ghiyath ibn Abi Karima al-Adawi. He was from the freed slaves of the family of Zayd bin Abi Zayd ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. Bishr al-Marisi, he was from the Kibar al-Fuqaha at one time. He was from the major scholars of fiqh. كان من كبار الفقهاء, from the major scholars of fiqh at one time. To the point where he even had taken knowledge from Al-Qadi Abi Yusuf. Who's Al-Qadi Abi Yusuf? Al-Qadi, his name was Ya'qub Ibrahim. He was from the companions of who? Not companions, but from those who had taken knowledge from, or those who were close to, who everyone? Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa. Meaning from those who are known to propagate the madhab al-Hanafi, meaning they had taken the knowledge from Abu Hanifa and serviced it, was Abu Yusuf. Abu Yusuf, where his name was Ya'qub ibn Ibrahim. Ya'qub ibn Ibrahim, who's Abu Yusuf, Bishr al-Marisi had taken knowledge from him. The point of why we're mentioning this is to let you know that Bishr al-Marisi at one time was from who? He was from those who had knowledge in affairs of fiqh. Rather, he was considered from Kibar al-Fuqaha, from the senior scholars, or from those who had knowledge concerning affairs of jurisprudence, or if you want to say, affairs pertaining to fiqh. He also narrated upon A'imma, from the ulama al-Sunnah, from them, Hammad ibn Salama, rahimahullah, wa Sufyan ibn Uyayna, rahimahullah. The problem was, he started reading the books of Kalam. He started reading the books of rhetoric, and the books of philosophy, and logic, until it overcame him, and he became affected, to the point where he ripped the cloak of the Sunnah off of him. And those affairs pertaining to piety and taqwa to the end of it, until he was dragged to the point he started calling to the Quran being created, where he believed it and he started calling to it. As he adopted the affairs of those who had propagated before, the Jahmiyyah, meaning in the past, he's the one that became the one who's the calling to it. It all moved to him. So we had Ja'd al-Dirham, then Jahm al-Safwan. Then the one who became an Ayn al-Jahmiyyah of his time, meaning those who were actually the Jahmiyyah of his time, meaning he carried their banner, was Bishr al-Marisi. Because he started the call to what? The Quran being created. So he was considered the people who was servicing the deviant methodology of the Jahmiyyah at his time, and considered it its scholar, until the people of knowledge, meaning the people of Sunnah, detested him, to the point where a lot of the ulama al-Amsar, the ulama of that time, considered him to be outside the fold of Islam. However, what we want to say is that Bishr al-Marisi did not reach Jahm al-Safwan. Even though he adopted a lot of his statements, and he had accepted or derived those statements or taken those statements from the followers of Jahm al-Safwan. So I'll make that point clear again. He didn't reach Jahm al-Safwan, but he learned a lot of his statements, and he learned them from who? The followers of Jahm al-Safwan. You'll find that they say that Bishr al-Marisi, that he died around the time Sanata Thamani Ashara wa Mi'atayn, around the century or the 3rd century, which was approximately in the year 218. They say he almost reached the age of 80. So to the close where he became the age around 80 when he died. To the point where he used to call him Bishop al-Shawr. He used to call him Bishop al-Shawr. That was his name, Bishop, the evil one. He used to call him Bishop al-Shawr. Then there was Bishop al-Hafi, who's the opposite. That's what I wanted to speak about today. The opposite of Bishr al-Marisi was Bishop al-Hafi, whose name was known Abu Nasr al-Marwazi, the great Imam. That's what I wanted to speak about. But anyway, the people of Sunnah used to say Bishr al-Marisi was Bishop al-Shawr, Bishop the one who is evil. Then you had the opposite, Bishr al-Hafi, his name was Abu Nasr al-Marwazi. But they used to call him Bishr al-Khayr. Bishr al-Khayr. Just as Imam Ahmad was known, Ahmad al-Sunnah. Right, everyone? Imam Ahmad. Then you had Ahmad al-Bid'ah, who was Ahmad ibn Abi Du'ad. Ahmad ibn Abi Du'ad used to call him Ahmad al-Bid'ah. That's what you'll find in the great Imam al-Dhahabi mentioned concerning Bishr Marisi. I had more, but in summary, I think that would suffice. You'll find from those books that refuted Bishr Marisi is those books such as, and from the best, there's more, there's a lot of them, but from them is a book entitled Naqd Uthman ibn Sa'id al-Darimi. In this book, which is, they say, is tremendous, in which Shaykh al-Islam used to advise the students of knowledge to read. It's called Naqd, meaning the criticism of the Uthman ibn Sa'id al-Darimi, or they call it the criticism of Uthman ibn Sa'id al-Darimi upon Bishr Marisi, in which the book I have in my library. It's one volume. So you'll find that Shaykh al-Islam is speaking about here. Let's return to the book where he mentioned. And we'll talk about the affairs pertaining to those ulama of the past who Shaykh al-Islam mentioned, but was considered from those who were affected by Sufi a little bit. We'll explain that. So let's read it. So let's go back to the book and read. He says, وَلَمَّا كَانَ فِي حُدُودِ الْمِئَةِ الثَّانِيَةِ. He says, so when the affairs approximately taking place in the 2nd century, this statement of the Jahmiyyah spread until the Salaf criticized it. And he said that these statements were the same exact statements of the Jahmiyyah because of what Bishr Marisi had spread it and what he adopted of the statements and the madhab of the Jahmiyyah and those who are with him and the ulama who spoke about him, meaning that they criticized and condemned him in his statements. But from them was the Imam Malik ibn Anas ibn Malik ibn Amr ibn Abi Amr al-Usbahi, Imam al-Hijrah, the great Imam. Right, so let's read what Shaykh al-Islam mentions, everyone. Was Sufyan ibn Uyayna. So this is what Shaykh al-Islam mentioned of those who criticize Bishr Marisi. If you look in your book, وَكَلَامْ الْأَئِمَّةِ مِثْلُ Malik, similar to Malik, similar to Sufyan ibn Uyayna, وَابْنُ al-Mubarak, وَأَبُو Yusuf. We just said who Abu Yusuf was. His name was what, everyone? Yaqub ibn Ibrahim. كان من أصحاب الإمام أبي حنيفة. He was from those who learned in service to Madhab al-Hanafi, meaning that he was close to Abu Hanifa. But his name was Yaqub ibn Ibrahim al-Ansari al-Kufi, Sahib Imam Abi Hanifa, rahimahullah. Anyway, those who criticized Bishr Marisi was these great Imam Malik, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Ibn al-Mubarak, Abu Yusuf, Shafi'i, the great Imam Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i, Ahmad, Ishaq, Fudayl ibn Iyad, Bishr al-Hafi. Bishr al-Hafi, we just mentioned him. We just mentioned his name, right, everyone? And other than them, as it pertains to these A'imma, great A'imma who condemned these people, meaning who was upon the way, or rather the people of the Jahmiyyah, whether they be Ja'd al-Dirham or Jabal al-Sufwan, and who are upon his madhab, evil madhab, and those who followed in the same manner, such as Bishr Marisi, who was upon his way. How these scholars who we just mentioned condemn them and consider them misguided. Is clear, everyone? Right. So this is what we want to cover today. Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah mentions and says, so how the misguidance had creeped in the Ummah? How did these satanic practices and how did these satanic ways, these satanic affairs of misguidance creep within the Ummah until it started to poison the Muslims and it may render them in a state of severe weakness? How did this take place? It had taken place from when Shaitan had entered of all the affairs pertaining, number one, as we said, returning back to the first deviant sect in Islam, who were considered who, everyone, as we said? The Khawarij. The Khawarij was the first deviant sect in Islam. The first discrepancy in those who tried to pollute the pure Aqidah was the Khawarij. Then second, as we mentioned, was who? The Shia. The Shia came after the Khawarij. Who came after the Khawarij? The Shia. And who came after the Shia? Ahsant. The Qadariyah. The Qadariyah came after that. The Qadariyah. We'll talk about these affairs in a minute. Don't worry, inshallah. You'll find that those deviant sects, everyone, those deviant sects, matter of fact, we'll talk about that in a minute. I don't want to talk about that right now. I don't want to get sidetracked. Know for sure that the affairs of the Jahmiyyah were considered affairs, or the first deviant sects that were affected by kalam, or by the affairs pertaining to rhetoric, philosophy, logic. That was pertaining to Jahmiyyah and those who follow upon their way, Mishmarisi, which we'll talk about. But the thing that we wanted to bring everyone's attention is to this affair pertaining to how did this creep in the ranks of the Muslims. Where did it take place? How did it happen? Like we talked about before, and Shaykh al-Islam clearly mentions it here. What does he say? He said, وَأَكْثَرَ مَا عُرِّبَتْ الْكُتُبْ الرُّومِيَّةِ. How the Arabic books of Rome were Arabized, meaning that they were translated into Arabic. And how the people became active in translating them from the books of logic from Rome, into what? Into Arabic, and then it was brought within the ranks of the Muslims. Those who adopted it, and who had put this covenant towards being very diligent in translating these books, started with the Khalifat al-Ma'mun. Khalifat al-Ma'mun al-Abbasi. Well, we know Khalifat al-Ma'mun al-Abbasi was the one who was responsible for what, everyone? For punishing who? The Imam Ahmad. Ahmad ibn Hanbal al-Shaybani. The great Imam of Ahl Sunnah, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah. However, al-Ma'mun al-Abbasi, who was from the Khilafah al-Abbasiyah, had those books translated, and not only that, but he also adopted the ideologies of the Mu'tazila, of course, by bringing these people, these innovators, close. And he also put forth a lot of money in purchasing these books and adopting the treasures of those foreign books. Those treasures that contained those foreign books, and had them translated into Arabic, until he entered upon the people these atrocities, these great matters that were detrimental to the Muslims. But notice that Shaykh al-Islam goes on to say, وَزَادَ الْبَلَاء مَعْمَا لَقَى الشَّيْطَانِ. So notice that all these affairs pertaining to the Quran being created, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is everywhere, or that Allah is not above. Notice that Shaykh al-Islam described all these affairs of statements and inspiration of the devils, meaning the unseen devils. So it's all satanic inspiration. Satanic, demonic inspiration. Because that's where all these ideas come from the devils. He said what they cast in those misguided from before, and the same type of what he casted in those who were similar to those in the past, meaning the later generations, because of what their hearts were upon. He said, for what came in the 2nd century, meaning after the death of Jahl ibn Dirham, and after the death of who? Jahl ibn Safwan. Even though, like we said, of what had taken place as far as the murder and the killing of Jahl ibn Safwan, as we said, Jahl ibn Safwan, some of them say he was killed, and some of them say he died. But we know that the one who was actually put to death was who? Jahl ibn Dirham, who was killed by what? Or by the Khalifa, whose name was what? His name was who? Khalid al-Qasri. Khalid ibn Abdullah al-Qasri. So if I've touched you guys, and I will, I hope you guys are ready. Because all these things I want you guys to have memorized. And I expect to memorize. So who killed Jahl ibn Dirham? Khalid ibn Abdullah al-Qasri. Was Jahm ibn Safwan killed upon khilaf? Some of them say he was, and some of them say he what? Died. But at any rate, the statement of Jahm ibn Safwan became spread amongst the people. And the Salaf that they called this, even though it was not, or the one who was heading the devious side was Jahm ibn Safwan himself, but still, notice the Salaf still described it as being what? The Jahmiyyah. That's what we spoke about in previous classes. You'll find that those who've been affected by the Jahmiyyah, even though they're called a different name, such as the Ash'ari. The Ash'ari. Notice they still call them Ash'ari, but in actuality they're Kullabiyah. And you'll find that they also call them Jahmiyyah. You'll find that they call them Jahmiyyah, Kullabiyah, Ash'ariyah. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? Why? Because the traces or the misguidance that they're upon, if you trace it back, it all goes back to who? Jahm ibn Safwan. From that is what? That Allah is not above. Because that statement originated from who? The Jahmiyyah. So that's the reason why you'll find that they call them Jahmi, Kullabi, Ash'ari, Kullabi, Jahmi. You understand, everyone? And those names are correct. So a person will say they're not Jahmi, they don't call themselves Jahmi, they don't call themselves that name. But if you was to ask them, do you believe that Allah is above? No, we don't. Where did that originate from? From the Jahmiyyah. So that's why we called you that. Is it clear? So that's the reason why you'll find that these days a person will say, well, that's not correct, they're not Jahmi, they don't say themselves to be Jahmi. Nor do certain individuals call themselves Ikhwani. But we know we call them Ikhwani. Same thing with a person with a non-Muslim. Call them a Kafir. If you was to ask them, do you know your name's a Kafir? No, I don't call myself a Kafir. But we know that is their name. It's applicable to them. Is this clear to everyone? Because I've heard this nonsense from certain ignorant Muslims that from deviation, they say that. Well, I'm not going to call so-and-so Ikhwani. They don't know they're Ikhwani. Is that a prerequisite? You understand? Is that a prerequisite? For example, matter of fact, I think you guys are going to clear. Let's keep on. Fine. So what we were mentioning is saying, in those who have been ascribed to the Jahmiyyah during the time of Bishop Medisi, was him, everyone. He's the one that now adopted all the affairs of the Jahmiyyah of his time. Being ascribed to Jahm ibn Safwan, because like he said, he had taken on the burden of spreading the same madhab, the same ideologies, even though he did not call himself what? Jahmi. So it's the same example that we just what? Mentioned. Is it clear, everyone? Jay. Al-Imam Malik, as it says in his book, as the great Shaykh al-Islam goes on to say, Al-Imam Malik, as we know, is Imam who? The Imam of Dar al-Hijrah, of Medina. Because we know the Imam Malik was where? He seldom wherever he wants to spread his knowledge where? In Medina, the city of Masjid. Al-Imam al-Shafi'i, towards the end of his life, where did Imam al-Shafi'i settle? He settled in Egypt. Imam al-Shafi'i. Towards the end, that's where he settled. Let's keep getting focused. Al-Imam Malik is in where everyone? In Al-Madinah. So he's called Imam al-Hijrah. Sufyan ibn Uyayna, everyone, I'm sure that everyone is familiar with who? Sufyan ibn Uyayna. His name was who, everyone? His name was Abu Muhammad Sufyan ibn Uyayna ibn Abi Imran. Ibn Abi Imran, his grandfather, his kunya was Abi Imran, but his name was Maymun. That was his grandfather's name. Maymun al-Hilali. Al-Hilali, the great Imam. We know that he originated from Kufa, but where did Imam Sufyan ibn Uyayna settle? Mecca. He came originally from Kufa, which is currently where? In Iraq. But he eventually settled where? In Mecca, until he was described to be Meccan. Is it clear, everyone? I think everyone knows the great high status of Sufyan ibn Uyayna, inshallah. I hope so. If not, then one needs to know that he was from the great Imam of Hadith, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, great Imam, very high status within our religion, and very high status from the great scholars of this religion, in which we need to know who he is and investigate his seerah. If one has the ability to go back to the books such as Siyar A'lam al-Nubala by the great Imam al-Zahabi, and check to read and be more accustomed and adapted to the life of these great Imam. But Sufyan ibn Uyayna, his name again, Abu Muhammad Sufyan ibn Uyayna, his grandfather was named Abi Imran Maymun. Abi Imran Maymun al-Hilali, the great Imam. So, Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah said, these great mountains of knowledge criticize Bishop Marisi, criticize those who adopted the ideas or the corrupt principles of the Jahmiyyah. From these great A'imma that criticized was these great tremendous mountains of knowledge. Great Imam Abu Malik ibn Anas al-Uswahi, Imam Dar al-Hijrah. From them, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, the great Imam Abu Muhammad Sufyan ibn Uyayna ibn Abi Imran, as we just mentioned. From them, as we mentioned, Muhammad ibn Hassan was Amiruhu wal Imam Abu Hanifa Nafsu, Abu Yusuf. Abu Yusuf, like we mentioned, said, is Sahibu Abi Hanifa, as we mentioned. And his comrade who was close to him was Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani. Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani. All of them was from Ashab Abi Hanifa. Abu Aqali, Abu Yusuf. You guys need to have these memorized. If you start to increase your knowledge, all that I'm teaching you now is all going to come together. Like, man, we heard those names in those classes. You're going to find that these names come up all the time. Especially if you start to now, even in affairs, if you want to specialize in affairs of jurisprudence and fiqh, these names are definitely going to come up. Like I said, those who are close to Abi Hanifa, such as Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf, Yaqub Ibrahim was his name, and his comrade, Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani. All of them was from Ashab Abi Hanifa. Is it clear, everyone? They were from the companions of Abu Hanifa. And I think there's no student that knows except that they know, inshallah, Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i, with Imam Ahmad, with Ishaq ibn Rahawayh, to the end of them. So I don't, because how much they are known and the high status and the greatness of whom they are, I think we don't have to go inside mentioning their seerah. Al-Shafi'i wa Ahmad and Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, or excuse me, Ishaq ibn Ibrahim ibn Rahawayh, rahimahullah. طيب. For a person now, he needs to go back to the books of Tarajum. There's also called books of Firaq, because we do have books in deviant sects in Islam. We have them from the past and we have them from the current days. Everything in this religion has been surfaced, where things are clear as the sun in the sky. We have books called Kutub al-Firaq, books of sects, Kutub al-Firaq. And to the point, you'll find there's a book called Al-Farq Bayn al-Firaq, the difference between the deviant sects. That's the name of the book. Al-Farq Bayn al-Firaq. Al-Farq Bayn al-Firaq. The difference between the deviant sects, by Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi. If I'm not mistaken, just check for me. But I think it's Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, great Imam. From those books that teach you the deviant sects, now listen to this, by Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari himself, called Maqalat al-Islamiyyin wa Ikhtilaf al-Musallin, by Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari. He also brings information concerning the deviant sects of Islam. Is it clear, everyone? And the book's called Al-Milal wal-Nihal by Shaykh al-Stadi. There's Al-Milal wal-Nihal. Al-Milal means the different religious sects. Al-Milal, meaning Millah. The plural is Milal, meaning the different religious sects. Wal-Nihal means the same thing. Schisms, or partial broken schisms, meaning different parties. That's the name of the book, called Milal wa Nihal. You have one by Shaykh al-Stani, and I think you have one by Ibn Hazm. I think they both have a book called Milal wa Nihal. All those books allows the Muslim to be what? Acclimated, or to be acquired, and have some knowledge concerning the deviant sects in Islam, and who they are, and what was their ideologies, and where they deviated. You'll find that all their books, all these books mentioned the deviant sects in Islam, and even the deviant sects from the Christians and the Jews, how the discrepancy fell into the belief system and the foundation. That's why they became a sect. However, we know that the Messenger of Allah said that all of those sects are in hell except one. Meaning that those who follow those ways of today, during the time of that messenger or that prophet that came before, then we know his message was valid for those people at that time. Is it clear, everyone? Those who what Prophet Musa came with, that was the Sharia of their time. Of what Prophet Isa came with was the Sharia for that time and for that people. The only Sharia is valid of today is the Sharia of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That is the only Sharia that is valid. Even though that Sharia is valid, anyone who deviates in the creed of the Sharia of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is considered a deviant sect until they will what? Be in the pit or fall in the pit of hell, if they have not, or their deviation has not nullified their Islam, then they'll be in hell forever. But if their deviation have rendered them in a state of great fisk, which is called fisk of i'tiqad. Fisk of i'tiqad. Not the fisk, because we know fisk is of two types. You have fisk al-amal. You have the fisk, meaning the sin or the evil doing of actions. And you have the sin and the fisk of your belief. The fisk of your belief is worse. Even though all of it is evil, all of it can land one in hell. However, the fisk of amal will allow one to, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, the fisk of actions can render a person to hellfire temporarily, where they will have to be purified of their sin. The fisk of i'tiqad can also put a person in the hellfire. Yes, he can. The fisk of i'tiqad can put a person in the hellfire, such as believing that Allah is everywhere. That's a fisk of i'tiqad. That's evil sin. That's a sin. It's a type of sin, but it's a sin of the belief. Well, that's the worst type, because that's considered deviation and it's considered bid'ah. And deviation and bid'ah is worse, because we know that the Salaf used to say what we want. أن البدعة أحب إلى إبليس من المعاصي. They said that bid'ah is more beloved to the devil than what? Than sin. Anyway, the fisk of i'tiqad, such as the belief that Allah is everywhere, or the belief that Allah does not have, that He does not have those attributes or those names that He ascribed, or that He affirms to Himself and also the Messenger of Allah, fisk of i'tiqad. Fisk of i'tiqad, such as what the Khawarij believe. Fisk of i'tiqad, such as what the Ikhwanis believe, and such as the Sufis, and other than them, from those who have deviated fundamentally in the religion. If their bid'ah has taken them outside the fold of Islam, or has nullified their Islam, they'll be in the hellfire forever. From the hulat, especially from those who are from the extremists of the Sufis. From the extremists of the Sufis, and from those from the Rawafid, especially those who are upon the deviation or from the hulat, from the Rawafid and other than them. And especially, for example, the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam are not even a deviant sect in Islam. They are kuffar. They are not considered Muslimun, where they're this deviant sects. No, they're not. They're not in the fold of Islam at all. As long as they say Master Fard Muhammad and that Elijah Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, that is a nullifier of the religion. Even if you believe that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is the messenger of Allah. If you believe that Elijah Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, that belief nullifies your Islam. Nullifies it. And if you believe there's no day of resurrection, rather there's a mothership that will come to rescue the black man, that's also an affair that will nullify Islam. The denial of the day of resurrection nullifies your religion completely. If you do not believe there will be a day of resurrection where the people will be raised and held accountable for what they've done in this world, that is a nullifier of your religion. Why? Because you're denying those affairs that pertain to what they call i'tiqad. And when we say i'tiqad, when we say qawl al-qalb, affairs pertaining to iman, which is called qawl al-qalb. We'll talk about that later. Qawl al-qalb. Qawl al-qalb is the affairs pertaining to iman. Meaning the 6 articles of faith, and from them is what, everyone? From them is the belief there's a day of resurrection. Also, the deviation in the articles of faith also will put you in the affairs either being Islam being nullified or and state from being from the deviant sects. The Qadariyah from Ma'bad al-Juhani وغيلان Dimashqi, the Qadariyah from the beginning, who denied that Allah did not have knowledge of affairs until they happen, those affairs nullify the Islam. Anyway, so what we want to just sum up and say, in regards to the hellfire, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us and you from it. The fisq of i'tiqad, the fisq of in belief, a person, if they have not left the fold of Islam, they will have to be purified in the hellfire until Allah will bring them out of the hellfire after they've been purified. If, like we mentioned, it said that bid'ah and their belief or that innovative practice and their belief or that sense of deviation, belief in deviation and their belief did not nullify their Islam. But if it didn't, then they will have to be put in the hellfire for what? Temporarily until he's brought out on the day of resurrection. Because some people will say, the Messenger of Allah said all of them in the hellfire, but he said they're from his ummah. They're from his ummah. He said there were 73 sects from my ummah. All of them are in hell except what? Except one. Fine. Notice that the great Imam goes on to say notice that Shaykh al-Islam said, Fudayl ibn Iyad. Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad. We know Fudayl ibn Iyad was, Shaykh al-Islam had also mentioned him from amongst those who criticized Bishop Marisi. We know Fudayl ibn Iyad. Fudayl ibn Iyad was considered from the scholars of the past, but he has some Sufiya with him. Because I wanted to mention that. He's Sufi, Kabir. And such from those, likewise, who? Bishop Hafi, Abu Nasr al-Marwazi, also. Because the student of knowledge might ask, isn't it known that these people have some Sufiya with them? Wasn't that known? So why did Shaykh al-Islam mention them? And use them as those scholars that criticize Bishop Marisi, even though they have some Sufiya? The answer from that is what the great Imam Muhammad Imam Jami even mentioned when he clarified this statement. He said those who in the past had Sufiya with them, such as Fudayl ibn Iyad, likewise Al-Junayd with Tustari, not Tasatturi, Tustari, and Abu Nasr al-Marwazi, whose name was Bishop al-Hafi. All of them were Ahl Ilm. He says, علمهم خفف وخفف من شطحات الصوفية. He said that the knowledge of the past in which we know them, or what they had, he said it was light from those little abominable beliefs of Sufiya. He said it was light. He said, and those shatahat, or those affairs that were in contrast to the truth, which agreed with Sufiya, despite the fact they were light, he said the heavy atrocities that the Sufiya believed, he said they left it off and abandoned them. They left it. In which those who were engrossed in Sufiya fell into. He said when they abandoned it and left it off, they became from Ahl Ilm. Even though there was a trace of it left. It was a little bit left. But to the point where they were not removed outside the fold of the Sunnah. Because you'll find in a lot of their books, they started criticizing what? The people of Batil and refuting them. And that is to clearly show that they what? That they disbelieved and rather they condemned highly what the people of falsehood were upon. An example of this is what Shaykh al-Islam mentioned here, where they condemned who? Bishop Idris. You'll find that there's from the scholars of the past who service our religion greatly, who had little traces of what? Ta'wil. Is it clear what I'm saying? He had a little bit of, fell into a little bit of affairs of ta'wil, meaning some of them who have falsely interpreted some of the names and attributes of Allah. They fell into ta'wil. What do I mean ta'wil? Tahrif. You'll find that the great Imam Shaykh Salih Fawzan, Hafidhullah, may Allah preserve him, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to benefit from him while he's alive. He mentioned that from the ulama of the past who had fell into certain errors such as what we just mentioned here. He said of what they put forth of the religion and what they service far outweighs of what they fell into of those deviant or of those discrepancies in these affairs which we're speaking about now. For example, Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar, who fell into some ta'wilat. He did. Rahimahullah. He fell into some ta'wilat. From them was Imam al-Nawawi, also fell into some ta'wilat. From those scholars of the past who fell into some ta'wilat, and from them who had some traces of Sufiya. From them is these scholars here, such as Fudayl al-Iyad, and such as Junayd, and such as Tustari, I think it's Suhail ibn Abdullah Tustari, and who we mentioned in here, Abu Nasr al-Marwazi, the great Imam, whose name was Bishr al-Hafi. He said, what these scholars put forth of service for the religion far outweighed of what they fell into of those little minor mistakes or those little traces of error and affairs pertaining to i'tiqad. He said, as far as the people of today, because a person might say, those people or those scholars who fell into some traces of mistakes, why can't we do the same in these days and times? He said, because you'll find the people of deviation these days, their service to the religion does not outweigh what these scholars did in the past at all. That's number one. What they put forth for service does not come anywhere near to what Hafiz al-Hajar did for the religion, or what Imam al-Nawawi put forth for service. He said, in addition to that, all the books and all the things that we need have been gathered. All the narrations, all the service, all the different affairs that we need in order to be properly guided, to the point where we do not need the people of innovation at all to take knowledge from in order for us to attain the ultimate goal, which is education and being well-grounded in the religion fundamentally, or any affairs of the branches, whether they be connected with fiqh or the likes of that. He said, we don't need these days, because everything now has been established, clarified, gathered to the end of it. He said, and that's the reason why we say it's the difference between those scholars who fell into minor mistakes of the past in comparison to those who are upon deviation of today. Is it clear, everyone? Is it clear? Is it not clear? Gee. So that's the reason why you'll find that we say the exact same thing. You'll find that Al-Fudayl al-Iyad, and you'll find the Bishr al-Hafi, Abu Nasr al-Marwazi. Who did they condemn here in this context? From the greatest of people, the greatest of innovators in that time was Bishr al-Idrisi. Highly condemned him, heavily, and criticized him to the point where even some of them declared him to be outside the world of Islam. So you'll find the great Imam Muhammad al-Jami goes on to say, you'll find that they condemned the people of falsehood, and they aided the people of truth, and they aided the truth. He said, وَإِنْ كَانَ لَا تَزَالُ فِي كُتُبِهِمْ بَعْضُ مَا يَدُلُّ عَلَى أَثْرِ التَّصَوُّفِ الَّذِي بَقِيَ عِنْدَهُمْ. He said, even though you'll find in some of their books some of what indicates that little bit of effect of Sufiya that they had remaining with them. You'll find that Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar, in which Shaykh Rabi' had mentioned about him, he said Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar, based upon the environment he was in, and what he believed, and what he had, service of the religion was tremendous. knew the great da'wah of Sunnah, it was not able to call to it. He said he wasn't able to make excuses for the great Imam Hamzah Abdur Razzaq, rahimahullah, of what he was around and the type of environment he was in. You'll find that scholars from the Sunnah, in which they weren't, some of them were not exposed, but you'll find their achievements was a great service, even though the environment they were in was evil. But the great service that they were upon, and the achievements and the different works that they have still to this day are beneficial of the past. But at the same time, one has to make it known and clear the mistakes and errors in which some of those books contain. If those books service us, especially in what we're mentioning, such as the great Imam Hamzah ibn Hajar has service, rather he's considered to have the best explanation of Sahih Bukhari, which is called what? Fath al-Bari. Imam ibn Baaz said that there were little minor mistakes Hamzah ibn Hajar made in affairs of Ta'wilat al-Sifat. He came and clarified it until the actual danger had been removed. But Hamzah ibn Hajar, what he put forth, and if everyone was to see how many books of Hamzah ibn Hajar had wrote, it's a library in itself, probably, of the books that he wrote, rahimahullah. And to the point, this is to let you know the high status of Hamzah ibn Hajar. This is just to put in perspective the great status. Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar, any student of knowledge knows if he wanted to start knowledge of hadith, what is the first book the ulama tell you to read? What is the first book? Except that it's entitled what, everyone? What is it entitled? Does anyone know? Nukhbatul Fikr. Nukhbatul Fikr is the first book that any student of knowledge is supposed to pick up in regards to learning Mustalah al-Hadith. Nukhbatul Fikr. Even some of the ulama say you should read that before Bayquniyah. And some of them say that it's better than Bayquniyah, even though they're upon the same level. That's to let you know the high status of Hafiz ibn Hajar. So if I wanted to specialize in hadith and start learning it, and affairs pertains connected to it, first book you pick up, Nukhbatul Fikr. Let's move on. Let's move on to fiqh. Same thing. In affairs of fiqh, if you want to specialize in fiqh, in jurisprudence, ala tariq al-muhaddithin, in a manner that's pertaining to learning fiqh in the manner of the people who learn hadith, from those books that Reform wants to specialize in, what are those books they mention? Umdat al-Ahkam, and some of them say, of course, Arba'in al-Nawawiyah, that's connected also with fundamentals, but then they also mention what? Bulugh al-Maram. Bulugh al-Maram, obtaining the objective by who? Hafiz ibn Hajar. If a person wanted to specialize in going through the Kutub al-Sitta, the first book that if a person wanted to specialize in hadith and going through the books of hadith, starts with what? Sahih Bukhari. Greatest sharh, even though there was more than one explanation for Bukhari. A lot of people think that the only explanation for Sahih Bukhari is Fath al-Bari. No, there isn't. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them shuruh. There's a lot of explanations of Sahih Bukhari. From them was Ibn Rajab. He has an explanation. He didn't finish it, rahimahullah. I don't think he finished it. From them, Ibn Rajab. From them, Al-Qustulani. From them, Al-Aini. From them, Ibn Rajab. From them. There's a lot of explanations. However, they say the greatest of all of them, the explanation of Sahih Bukhari, Fath al-Bari. To the point where some of the ulama say, La hijra ba'd al-Fath. They say that there's no migration after the Fath. Meaning, here in this particular context, he's talking about Fath al-Bari. Meaning there's no better explanation of Sahih Bukhari than Fath al-Bari, in which the ulama al-Amsar all read it and seen the tremendous works that was put towards servicing that book. But Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar, as we know, had fell into a little bit of ta'wilat as far as misinterpretation of some of the names and attributes until the ulama clarified it, until the danger of those mistakes have been removed. Is it clear, everyone? J. Same thing, it's applicable to what we mentioned in here. So what I just mentioned, apply it here. So you'll find in certain books that even though they aided the truth and condemned these people of innovation, still you will find that there's been a little bit of remnants or affairs remaining of what? Tasawwuf. In some of their what? In some of their books. For that reason, we want to take the initiative to what? That Tasawwuf, that it started in Basra. Now listen to this. Sufiya or Tasawwuf started where, everyone? In Basra. You guys memorizing this because I will test you. It started in Basra. It started with a type of taqashuf. It started with a type of devotedness to worship, like to be isolated or introverted, or a person just devoting to worship. Now listen to this. Listen closely. It started with a type of isolation, not totally cutting people off, but to be isolated. And it started with zuhd, meaning abstination from worldly things. A lot of people think that a person to have zuhd means that you have to look bad, like you're doing bad. It doesn't. Zuhd can also mean that you just live a simple life. And if you're just being tested because of certain affairs that did come as a result of it, your clothes didn't look as neat or pristine as certain other people's affairs, because that was your how, that was what you were being tested with, that's something different. We're talking about zuhd is just someone living a simple life. He's just living a practical life. I don't have to have the fancy cars. It's simple. I have what I need. Just food on the table. I have what I have. It's just practical. Living a practical life. A simple life. Certain people in the Salaf were tested until they became impoverished. That's something different. We'll talk about that later. But anyway, Sufiya started with taqashuf. Taqashuf meaning being isolated, devotion to worship, and zuhd, meaning abstination from the worldly life or extravagant life. That's what they call zuhd. And I think they call it an ascetic or asceticism, not aestheticism. Alhamdulillah, brothers in English corrected me. He said the difference between asceticism and aestheticism. And an ascetic is a person that abstains from worldly things. Aesthetic is somebody that specializes in different arts, certain things like that. But an ascetic is one that what? He abstains from worldly things and lives like a practical life, basically. But anyway, this is how Sufiya started off. It started off when people abstained from the dunya, being devoted to worship. This was the beginning. Until, now this is what Shaykh al-Islam said. It started with these people being involved in these affairs of abstaining from the worldly life or extravagant life and the likes, right everyone? Until they were fully devoted to worship. Now listen to this. Shaitan came and entered upon them from this aspect. So دخلوا عليه الشيطان. الشيطان دخل عليهم. It says Shaitan came upon them. Why? Because for the Shaitan he has passageways that he tries to enter upon the children of Adam. Here they entered upon the people who devoted to worship all the time. يدخل على العباد غالبا. He said you'll find that Shaitan will enter upon the Baaz, people devoted in worship, being isolated and being what? Introverted. Which is to let you know that introversion or isolation is not from our religion. To be told fully devoted, being isolated all the time. We know everything in our religion is what? A balance. We have times where during the year, where we do devote more in time to our worship, such as Ramadan. Ramadan is when we give time just for our Lord. That's devotion where we're supposed to put our great effort to what? More towards what everyone? Worship. But we know ultimately our balanced ways is that we're always what? We're balanced. Is it clear, everyone? So you'll find that the Shaitan entered upon them until he made them fall into ghulu. He made them fall into being what? Excessive. Being excessive. Exceeding the bounds. Until he came and he decorated for them until the point they started wearing clothes of wool, which is called suf. Started wearing clothes of suf, which is called wool in English. And that they started abandoning everything else other than what? Wearing wool or clothes made up from wool. So until they became known as what? Sufiya. Is it clear? So everyone that sticks to Suf at that particular time was called what? Sufi. They were called Sufi. Because during that particular time, they had become famous, the type of garment or clothes they would wear, which was made out of what, everyone? Suf. It was made out of wool, Suf. Now listen to this. Now listen to Shaykh al-Islam. He said, Shaitan just didn't stop there. He said he didn't stop there. So Shaitan always tries to go to another what? Level. He said, until he entered upon them, Zandaqa and Ilhad. Shaitan didn't just stop there. In affairs pertaining to what we just mentioned, he even made them fall to the point of what? A great deviation, and they became heretics. Coming with heretics and great levels and deep levels of deviation. Which is called Zandaqa. And Zandaqa is like a what? It's considered like a heretic, like a person that's upon great deviation. And being engrossed inside of satanic ideologies. And being overcome by it. To the point you start hearing them say, such as, we reached the level of until we became one with Allah and Allah became one with us. Or you start hearing things such as, I reached the level of worship to the point I don't have to pray anymore. And you heard the Sufi say this, they say it. And you find that, for example, some of them giving the khutbahs while I was naked. Or some of them start falling into sin and having sex with prostitutes. And say, oh yeah, he reached the level of haqiqah. You don't have to worry about sin anymore. Zandaqa. Filth. Or they started believing that Allah is everywhere. Or that Allah has become one with me and I become one with Allah. Or Allah became one with the creation. And other than that, from the different atrocities that they come with, and they started bringing filth. For example, some of the Sufis that they believe, for example, Abdul Qadir Jilani, that they said that Allah fell down in the paradise and he picked them up. That's all Zandaqa, filth. Heretics, filth. So Shaitan made them fall to all these affairs. So he started from the aspect of what? Isolation. That's the reason why a Muslim is not supposed to be always what? Isolated. He's not supposed to be introverted all the time. If he has some hard days, okay, fine. But you have to still maintain your what? You have to maintain your balance. You can't let one affair override the other. Is it clear, everyone? You can't. Shaitan will come upon you. And he will start making you overthink and you will go crazy. Is it clear, everyone? So this is what happened with people who are righteous from the past. They became isolated like in a monastery like monks until Shaitan corrupted them. Gee. So, this type of ghulu within the righteous, that's what they call da'wah tafani fillah, until they reach the level of wahdat al-wujud, as we just mentioned, that Allah became unified with the creation became unified with Allah. And this is the extent of what Sufiya became, and this was the final outcome of what we see now. Exactly. That it became and reached this extent. Where did it originate from? What we just said. It started off with them just wearing Suf. So back then, Sufiya was a little bit it was in the beginning stages of what it reached today, but it was a little bit back then, it was considered a little bit lighter at the beginning. But Shaitan progressed until it became something totally satanic. Is it clear, everyone? That's the reason why we're so hard against the Sufis, because what they believe is filthy. The belief and atrocities of Sufi will make you throw up. And some of the histories of them, how they used to give khutbahs naked. Yes, you have stories about them giving a khutbah naked. He's a wali, he's a mawla. Mawla giving a khutbah naked, really? And they witnesses, what is he doing? He's giving a khutbah naked, he's lost his mind? It's insane. Anyway, for Summu Sufiya, in order to ascribe to wearing suf, this is where it started with. Not some of the people who was sympathized with the Sufis. That's great Imam Shaykh Muhammad al-Jami says. He said, "Innaha or inna an-nisba ila safa." He said, Sufis are ascribed to safa. He said that's incorrect. That nisba or that ascription, that his name, if you say that he was ascribed to safa, as-safa, not as-safa, excuse me, as-safa. As-safa means purity, means tahara. So some people that sympathize with the Sufis, they say, no, he's not Sufi because he wears suf. He's Sufi because he's ascribed to purity, where the Arabic word is called safa. He said that's incorrect, because if that was the case, it would be safa'i. He wouldn't be Sufi, he'd be safa'i. He said, nor is it an ascription to Sufa. Now that's another topic for later. The people to Ahl Sufa. Just a side point quickly. Ahl Sufa happened during the time of the Messenger of Allah. It's correct. It's a story that's happened during the time of the Messenger of Allah. It happened when the people migrated to Al-Madinah. There were certain people when they arrived to Al-Madinah who was very from the indigent. They were impoverished greatly, until the point where some of them lived in the Masjid. From them was great Sahaba. From them, if what I remember is from them was Abu Hurairah, if I'm not mistaken. They were in a great state of poverty, where they had to stay in the Masjid. Right? And I'll bring this in the next class, inshallah. The story of what Shaykh al-Islam refuted the Sufis, because they like to say, use the story of the Sufa. That's another dumb, as they say, goofy Sufi, right? Sufis truly are goofy. They are, truly. I'm serious. There's no other way you can put it. They are truly goofy. As they say, goof troop, with certain people that are just goofy, that do some dumb things. You know what? Sufis is the same thing. Goofy. Don't make no sense. But anyway, so what happened is, during Ahl Sufa, they were very poor, poverty-stricken. They stayed in the masjid until their affair became easy. Then they left. And it was a lot of Kibar Sahabas, great companions of the Masjid of Allah, who that was their state. And for what I remember, matter of fact, I'll talk about it later so I can get the story correct, because I want to bring it next class. The Sufis try to use the story of Ahl Sufa to say, look, these are great Sahaba. They were poverty-stricken, and then they became great in the religion, and we want to emulate them in a manner where we're devoted in the masjid, we stay there, we're poor, and this is what we'll do. We stay devoted in the masjid, we go around, and then after that, then we'll embark upon service of the religion or have you. And I'll bring the story, inshallah, next class, because the story was mentioned even in the book by the great Imam Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah entitled Al-Furqan Bayna Awliya al-Rahman wal Awliya al-Shaytan. The criteria that distinguish between the friends of Allah and the friends of the devil. Shaykh al-Islam mentioned this story here of how the Sufis used it to service their so-called falsehood. And he refuted it and he criticized it point by point. I'll bring it tomorrow, inshallah. I'll bring it tomorrow. But anyway, those who try to use excuses for the Sufis, they try to ascribe it to Ahl Sufa. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? He said that would be incorrect also. He said because if they were ascribed to Ahl Sufa, they would be called Sufi, not Sufi, Sufi. That would be the correct description. Sufi, not Sufi, Sufi. So nothing remains except to ascribe them to Suf, which is the garment of wearing wool. So that's why you'll find that Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, like you mentioned, has said, especially Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, bi kalamihim. So just to sum it up, everyone, this is the reason why you'll find that Shaykh al-Islam brings these great scholars such as Al-Qadi Iyad and such as Abu Nasr al-Marwazi, the great Imam, and he was known as Bishr al-Hafi. Bishr al-Hafi, until the point they used to call him Bishr al-Khayr. bishop of the people, of the good one. And the opposite of him was Bishop Marisi. Is it clear, everyone? Is it clear? He said, that's the reason why you'll find that Shaykh al-Islam said, he said they had a bit of tasawwuf. Because they had that bit of what? Taqashuf al-zuhd. They had that I keep saying asceticism, where they used to isolate and devote to worship and the abstination from worldly things. He said they had their little traces of that. He said, but like we talked about, it did not reach the level of those innovators. So in this aspect, like we said, they were considered from Ahlul Sunnah. And they were also saved from falling into those great deep levels or satanic, demonic beliefs of zandaqah, of being heretics and ilhad and denial of the law, subhanahu wa ta'ala, in his great existence being above the heavens. Instead of that, being one with the creation, being unified with the creation. All those affairs, these scholars were saved from. They were saved from these atrocities, these great levels of deviation. Is it clear? And those high, extensive levels of ghulu. And them so-called venerating men. Veneration of men, meaning being like the levels of Allah. And all those other different demonic, filthy practices of the Sufis of today. And those are the paths that fell into those deep levels of Sufism. So Shaykh al-Islam always will use those great scholars that have been protected from falling into that engrossment or that filth. And from them was these great scholars here, such as Fudayl ibn Iyad and such as Bishop Hafiz, rahimahumullah. And we'll stop here, inshallah. Is it clear though, everyone? Because I wanted to make that clear, because that is a methodology you have to realize. Because I know there will be a shaitan out there that will come to you. How do you take from Fudayl ibn Iyad when you have Sufiya from him? And now you know how to defend yourself. Because there will be a shaitan out there that will say that. Well, Abu Nasr Marwazi has Sufiya with him. Why do you take from him? Why do you take from Fudayl ibn Iyad? And you now, we here in these classes, educate yourself. So you know how to defend yourself. And you know how to defend your children, your families. From these type of satanic statements that people falsehood will try to use in order to corner you, but you'll know how to what? You'll know how to defend yourself. And you'll know how to refute and establish the truth. Is it clear? Fine. Is any questions about the class? So, you'll even find that Shaykh al-Islam even mentioned them in his refutation against Bishop Marisi. And the person would say, how Shaykh al-Islam used him to refute Bishop Marisi with people who have Sophia? Now you know the answer. If you guys read the book, you understand what I'm saying. Shaykh al-Islam criticized who? Bishop Marisi, by using the statements of who? Fudayl ibn Iyad and who? Bishop al-Hafi. So, a person would say, how Shaykh al-Islam defend the Sunnah by saying that the Imam of the past criticized who has Sufiya with them? Now you know the answer. Is it clear? Is it clear or is it not clear? Jake, I can't see a person that's got a mask on. I don't know. I can't see past the mask. Is it clear, everyone? Yes. Jake, we'll stop here and continue tomorrow. Also, I'll bring the statement of Shaykh al-Islam in regards to the other book, Al-Furqan. Baina Awliya al-Rahman and Awliya al-Shaytan. That's another book I would like to teach. We went through a little bit of it in Atlanta. It was very beneficial. That book was tremendous for time. Between the friends of Allah and the friends of the Shaytan. Tremendous book. And Shaykh al-Islam lays down all the different people who are friends of the devil. From the sorcerers, magicians, Sufis, to the end of it. People who believe Allah is everywhere. And he just broke it all down. These are the friends of the devil. Crazy book. Nice. Huh? I'm sorry.
We stayed there with Shaykh Ali Nasr.
Oh, Shaykh Ali Nasr Faqih explained it. He finished it, didn't he?
No, he didn't finish it. This is right before.
I attended some of the classes. I attended a couple of his classes when I was in Medina. I was there. Shaykh Ali Nasr Faqih is explaining it for time. He's explaining it. Beautiful book. Well, I'll bring it in tomorrow, inshallah. There's a sharh by Shaykh Salih Fawzan for Furqan. Nice explanation. Salih Fawzan is a nice explanation of that book. Excellent. Excellent, even though my tasbih doesn't mean nothing. But excellent explanation. It's straight to the point, clear. For anyone, even if they're a beginner, to read it and benefit by combining both scholars from Shaykh al-Islam and Shaykh Salih Fawzan. Nice explanation. I'll bring it tomorrow, inshallah. We'll stop here. Anything about the class? طيب صلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى اله وصحبه سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك